Everybody, how are you doing? This is the Disclosure Fest weekly live stream. And once again, this week, we have Dr. Stephen Greer here with us. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Of course, I host Fade to Black and Coast to Coast AM on the weekends. And Dr. Greer has always been a featured guest with us on both shows. And we're going to get to Dr. Greer in just a minute. I want to welcome everybody that is joining us from all around the world. A couple of very important notes that I need to get out of the way. Disclosure Fest and the Mass Meditation Initiative, which was to be held on June 20th in downtown Los Angeles at the historic Los Angeles Park, right next to Chinatown. Last year, we had 20,000 attendees. We were anticipating 25,000 attendees this year. It is the largest single day gathering of its kind anywhere in the world. We have moved the date because of the worldwide crisis we are going through to August 8th. Now, if you go, which is a Saturday, if you go to DisclosureFest.org, all of the information is there for you. In case anything goes wrong, and today anything is possible, we also have two other reserved dates with the city of Los Angeles and the state of California in September and October. That being said, a couple of exciting things that happened over the last month. Our Feed Your Souls initiative has fed 300 people a week down on Skid Row. We want to get that number up to 1,000. And all of that is done with your donations that you can do directly over at DisclosureFest.org. And with all of that, today is a very important show. And having Dr. Stephen Greer not only here with us, but part of Disclosure Fest and coming out to Los Angeles for the big event later on this summer, his work for the last 30 years and its importance cannot be measured. And for him to take the time again to join us today is so very, very important. And I want to thank you, Dr. Greer, for joining us again. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm surviving the police state lockdown all right, and we're out here at the country house in the mountains of Virginia, so at least it's beautiful, and although a bit rainy today, but we're doing fine. And about things being rescheduled, but everyone listening through my channel, I know you guys are expecting the premiere for Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. It has not been canceled. It was postponed from April 6th. Jimmy was going to be there and a whole lot of other folks. Unfortunately, we don't know when LA Live will reopen, because that event is 1,000 people. And it's not clear to me when and if they'll allow a gathering of that size indoors, even this summer. So again, as soon as we know, you'll know. But I don't control the state of California, and I don't control the city of Los Angeles. And we just have to do the best we can do. We had a whole bunch of events we were going to do this year, and for folks around the world, and have various premieres in Europe and Australia and elsewhere. But obviously this has thrown a monkey wrench into that. So I just want to let people know we are still planning to do it when and if we get cleared to open.
Now, the exciting news, I mean, we're all getting acclimated for the wrong and right reasons to being controlled right now. We never thought it would come to this. But the exciting news is I have been following Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind and what it is doing out there in the world. It is still #1 on Amazon and at the top of all of the network streaming that is going on. That says to me a couple of things, that people are getting the message, right? They want this information, but for you, it's got to be exciting to have all this hard work pay off, right?
Yeah, well, the plan always was, and 30 years ago when I had a visit from ETs that approached me in my house in North Carolina. I'm running this very busy emergency department. I'm an ER doctor, and the plan was always to try to build this to an awareness where there were millions of people who were doing higher consciousness meditation practices as a means for connecting to these civilizations through their paradigm, which is that one of universal consciousness and non-locality in physics, as we've spoken about. But the process of getting there has been, of course, arduous. And along the way, I realized I had to do something, a little thing called founding the Global Disclosure Project movement to end the secrecy on this, because in my naivete as a young doctor in 1990, when this started, it was exactly 30 years ago, by the way, for everyone. It was our 30-year anniversary of, the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And our motto is, if you can see it, one universe, one people. The foundation of our relationship with each other and these cosmic beings is this field of consciousness that we'll get into in a moment. But I knew that it would be sort of a difficult thing to do, because we have a couple of controversial paradigms. One is that we're not alone in the universe, which shouldn't be controversial, but because of ridicule and secrecy, it has been. And the other is having people who have been miseducated about the nature of themselves and of consciousness and their own mind and their own empowerment, that there had to be an outreach to understanding something beyond the linear reductionist scientific paradigm. Not that that would be put aside, but that we would add to it this concept of other dimensions, higher states of consciousness, the nature of the mind as something not limited to space and time. Dr. Russell Targ and I last week had a great discussion about that for about an hour and a half. And I think that it has been a very long road, but what's really exciting for me is to see people I have never known personally. Like, there's a woman who is a very big pop singer, apparently, named, my kids would say I'm really lame, Demi Lovato.
You said it right. You said Demi Lovato right.
Okay, good. So a shout out to Demi, because she did this great interview on Stevio, and then she tweeted out to 36 million people about how she really loved Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. I want to reach out to her and tell her she needs to get the app, the CE5 Contact app, because the movie introduces you to these concepts. The app is actually a full-on remote viewing training program, CE5 training program. It has a networking function, so you can see who is in your geographical area and make contact with them to form a group, even if it's a virtual group at this stage or a small group. And by the way, if a state allows 5 people or 10 people to get together, you can make a circle 6 feet apart. You can still social distance and get together and do this. So I think that, what I'm finding is that there are a lot of folks following this, like Jenny McCarthy and the Wahlberg, her husband, Donnie Wahlberg. I was on their show, and I had no idea they were interested in this. And what's really exciting is to see that on every level of society, people are getting interested. I mean, even Fox News had me on last week on the Laura Ingraham show.
I saw that.
It was a very conservative show, and it was sort of shocking. But in fact, I found that, a lot of people were saying, "Oh my God, how could you be on that network?" I said, to me, this subject transcends all those normal fracture lines of left, right, conservative, all the labels, because we're dealing with something that is interplanetary and cosmic. And I really don't see this breaking along the usual fractured lines of our society of all these tribalistic fighting factions. I see this as something that is inherently unifying, that transcends that cacophony of conflict. It's really exciting. I think that's the part of this that, as someone who's sort of in the center of this, where I'm getting contacted by every kind of person. Like there's a great rock band, if you like heavy metal, called Godsmack. Well, the lead guy, Sully Erna, has reached out to me, and he put out a tweet and saw the movie and is really excited. So there are all kinds of, and there's a band called Tool. I don't know. Yeah. So they're really into this. I was with them backstage, when they were in this area not long ago. But what I'm finding is that there are people from all walks of life, whether it's left, right, politicians, scientists, pop culture folks, who are realizing that this is the future of our civilization, is to become interplanetary, but also that the foundation for that is understanding a deep aspect of our spirituality that transcends the normal tribalism that humans break into.
Yeah,
And
and
so,
what I wanted to mention before we get out of time, run out of time, is the elephant in the room, which was last week. The Navy and the Pentagon officially, with quotes, released these 3 videos, and the media shows no signs of letting up and covering ET, UAP / UFO coverage, and that's the exciting part. But the other side of it is, especially with everything that's happening with Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind right now, the response from the world seemed to be more muted than some of the breaking news that we've had over the last 2 years on this subject. Did that surprise you?
No, because we're in the middle of a global pandemic that has collapsed our economic system, where we're heading into something that will be worse than the Great Depression if we're not careful. So I think, in that milieu, with that going on, it's very difficult for people to focus in any real depth in terms of the mainstream media on something like this, because unfortunately, the reporting on this subject always stops at the superficial. In other words, here's something that these pilots were chasing, and here's the footage, and it's something, quote, we don't understand. It never, if you look at mainstream media, it never goes any deeper than that. For example, what are they? Where have they come from? I quickly held up on Fox News this letter from Ben Rich, who was the head of the Lockheed Skunk Works, the super secret aerospace contracting outfit there up in the desert of California. And it was a letter from Ben Rich stating very specifically that there were 2 types of UFOs: ours, meaning man-made electromagnetic anti-grav devices, and ET. And he states this in his own handwriting. All right.
What was the response from Fox?
Oh, well, it was a very short, big network things are, 2, 3, 4 minutes. So, I mean, basically all that was said is, wow, there's a lot to unpack here. But the issue is, one of my point is making is that the issue never goes beyond that, except that in the case of the Pentagon footage, it reopened the door. And this is what it was really about.
Right.
Just as this documentary that exposes the false flag alien threat narrative, which is in the opening first chapter of Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, if you've seen the movie, they re-release this footage, but it gives the opportunity for the disinformation specialist, if you looked at the coverage and read it all the way through, at the very end of every story it's a threat to our national security. Right. It's a threat to our airspace. Again, it was an opportunity for them to subliminally reinforce this threat narrative, which has been the purpose of the release of that footage since late 2017, in December 2017. So that was always the agenda. We knew that. I mean, I immediately got an email from a very senior CIA person who's worked the UFO subject for decades and said, this is the same bunch of people who have been scamming the US government and the American public and the media for decades. I'm quoting. And we knew that right away. And that was because Unacknowledged, which had gone over onto various platforms and eventually got over 600 million viewers, was so trending that they wanted a countermeasure to tamp down that narrative.
Right.
Now, just as this documentary is trending and it's #1 all over the world, in fact, amongst all movies, including $100 million, $200 million feature films, it's in the top 30, which is unheard of for a crowdfunded indie documentary. So, surprise, they re-release this footage, which gives the opportunity for the spin masters of disinformation to attach the threat narrative to it, which is, of course, the opposite of the narrative and message that we're putting out. Right. And that is that there's no evidence that these civilizations are a threat. The threat is the national security state deceiving us that there is one, basically hoaxing the threat. So I don't, when people said, are you surprised that this came out again? I said, no, I'm expecting this sort of thing. This is what counterintelligence always tries to neutralize any sort of movement away from the narrative of disinformation that they specialize in. And so the Pentagon officially, I can tell you that when this came out in December of 2017, that was an official release.
That's right.
It was just through a cutout group, an organization that was chock full of CIA and Pentagon and Lockheed people who made it look like they got their hands on it and were able to release it. And then they attached this alien threat narrative. In reality, that was always part of the covert program. It's just being reinforced where they can milk that story again by re-releasing it last week with the narrative again that it's a threat to our airspace, a threat to our armed forces, a threat. Why do they need a threat? Because they need to prop up the warmongers and the big folks out there who are making trillions of dollars on the status quo of world conflict and how the world is operating, which is on a tribalistic war footing. We always have to find someone to be killing and hate. Who's the new people to hate?
You have to have it. Yeah.
They have to create a new enemy, right?
Right.
I mean, that's what all propagandists who are in governments know, is that in order to maintain their power through fear, they have to manifest a new enemy. So I think that this isn't surprising that this would happen. And I'm predicting that this will be more of these things will happen.
I find it interesting that they've actually officially released these now 3 times, right? Yes. If you think about it, you and I talked about it in December 2017. We talked about the UAP coverage last year extensively. That was another official acknowledgement coming out of the Navy and the Pentagon. And then now, very interestingly, they've released it a 3rd time with the fear narrative, when the fear pummeling of the public has been going on for 2 or 3 months now in mass media. And it's an opportunity. And it's also timed with the release of Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind.
Right. And I think, the problem is that, a lot of things are real that are things we should be concerned about. For example, elderly and people who have underlying conditions are really threatened by this current crisis.
No question.
But it's interesting. If you look at the statistics from a couple years ago, influenza killed 172 children. The last I checked on the CDC site, this particular crisis, there have been 3. So it's 1/50th and yet we have this situation where if you were to go to the public, the impression is that younger people and children are dropping dead like flies, but they're not. So I think that one of the concerns I always have is that a crisis becomes an opportunity for people who would like to take away our liberties and our freedoms. And they can create something that's a legitimate crisis. I'm not saying it's not. And then capitalize on it. So this is what we have to be very, very careful of going forward in terms of disclosure and making contact, is that there are folks who are going to try to spin any situation to their fascist police state agendas. And this is why we have to be ever vigilant for our freedoms and our liberty, because there are folks who will try to capitalize on that if we're not awake.
Do you feel that the public, when I say public, I mean the earth, especially today, is now finally becoming aware of that message that we've been talking about for so many years, which is fear is a way of control? Now they've seen it 24 hours a day for months on end now. Are you and I vindicated somewhat, and the rest of us that have been speaking about this for so long?
Yes, but I think the thing that is worrying me the most, and I want to be careful what I'm saying here so I don't get erased here. Right. If you get my drift, folks,
I do.
Listening. Oh, yes. And that is when I see National Guard troops outside a neighborhood Safeway in Washington, D.C., along with police force, for people going to get their bread and orange juice and food for the day. And no one is going, what the hell is going on here? In other words, and I know I'm dating myself, for those of us who are the 60s, 70s generation, this kind of police state tactic over something that's a healthcare issue and there's no civil unrest going on, there would have been massive, enormous pushback from the population for the overreach of police state tactics. Right now, everyone's going, oh, they're so obsequious and obedient and conformist. They're going, oh, okay, because they have everyone cowered. They have everyone terrified. And I think that this actually does concern me. I'm going to be very blunt here. I am very concerned that in our society, the compliance and the conformity and the sort of groveling before state power is very dangerous. It's necessary when it's necessary to obey rules and laws. I'm not saying I'm not an anarchist at all, but I'm saying when those powers get abused and there is widespread unthinking, unquestioning compliance, we're in trouble. We have really got to step back and go, oh, wait a minute here. And there's a lot of misinformation going out. So in the same way, what you see with disclosure is you will have people where something will begin to happen, and then the momentum will be hijacked by people who spin it in the direction of fear, hatred of all things alien, et cetera, and so on. And I think that an awake populace, what Eisenhower said, the populace needs to be awake to the threats to our democracy and our security by the excesses of the military-industrial complex. And Eisenhower said that because he had been betrayed by those same people on the UFO ET issue. We know this for a fact. So we have to look at how our response to a crisis is it appropriate? Is it measured? Are we letting authorities who always get drunk with power abuse that power, or are we putting them in check? Now, this is very important in the UFO subject because it is so ripe for abuse in terms of scaring people. Because let's face it, generally people are afraid of the unknown, and the word alien means foreign, although I don't use that term because it's non-specific. When you say alien, do you mean someone from Guatemala? Or do you
another country,
another country, or another dimension that's not ET, but it's from another dimension and not extraterrestrial? I never used the term alien for that reason, those of you listening, because I think words mean something. And so I use the word ET or extraterrestrial biological life form or something to that effect to be specific. But I think that what we're seeing, and by the way, it's Cinco de Mayo, a happy Cinco de Mayo to everyone. I think we should honor the cultures of the native peoples of America, Latin America, South America, because in their culture, the star people and the brothers and sisters from the stars, even right here, I'm looking at Shenandoah National Park. Shenandoah is believed to be derived from a Native American word that means sister from the stars or sister of the stars.
Right.
So, and I'm part Cherokee. My dad was half Cherokee Native American. So I kind of look at this and I go, there are a lot of people around the world that really do understand the idea that we're not alone in the universe and that that's a normal part of understanding. But what the military industrial complex realized between the 40s and the late 50s is that they could really make hay out of, as I'm quoting from a CIA document that said, where they can use the psychological warfare value of UFOs. I'm quoting from a CIA document, officially released, by the way, on this issue. And that's what's happened for 70 years, is that it's been taken and spun into this direction by people who obviously have an agenda that isn't about peace and exploration of space peacefully. Their agenda is trying to create the next boogeyman that everyone should be terrified about. And so when the Pentagon released those videos again, re-released it, I'm not saying release, I'm saying re-released.
3 times.
Yes, 3 times. Then I knew that there was going to be this entire attached narrative, which actually happened. And the anecdote for that kind of disinformation, quite honestly, is Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. People understanding that there is the reason and I haven't said this to you yet. The reason the director and I put that first chapter in there, which doesn't have anything per se to do with contact and consciousness and the CE5 protocols, but we used up the first 20 some minutes of that film to try to use a contemporary term, inoculate the population from the fear-based disinformation narrative of there being a threat from outer space. That we felt that we had to put that in there because most of the public have already been brainwashed that this is a threat. And if you really think it's a threat, you're not going to go sit out in your backyard or in a state park doing CE5 protocols and inviting to make contact, because you've already been convinced these are scary beings that you should be afraid of.
Right.
So this, I call it the contagion, the viral contagion of fear, is what these spinmeisters at the CIA and Pentagon and counterintelligence are expert at. And we've got to be awake to the fact that we need to counter that disinformation and manipulation, because that's how you get into a disaster like the Iraq War. That's how you get after 9/11. That's how you get into a disaster like Vietnam. That's how you get civilizational collapse over something like that's happening right now. If we overextend our response to it, that is how you get into an interplanetary conflict or an interplanetary war. So, these are huge stakes here we're talking about. And that's why I think we need people who are going to be telling people the truth and not get sucked into this contagion of fear. Because I think what we really have to fear is fear itself. But I think more importantly, being manipulated into having a compliant, conformist acceptance of what the authority figures are telling us. So if the authority figures who are attached to the government, to the Pentagon, even scientific entities say, oh yes, those are real objects we were chasing, but they're a threat to our armed forces. They're a threat to our national security. And people believe that in this sort of Pavlovian response, this automatic response that you're seeing now with this current crisis, without anyone questioning what's actually going on. I think we could be in real trouble down the road. And this is why I think this is a big wake-up call. And, the timing of it is strange, that, we're releasing this huge movement and expanding the CE5 Global Peace Initiative, which is what it is. It's an interplanetary peace initiative is what we're doing. And we go into lockdown, and then we have the re-release of this footage with that narrative. It's all very strange. You could call it a series of coincidences, but knowing what I know, having met with a lot of people at the CIA and Pentagon, I think it'd be a little too convenient by twice that it's an actual coincidence.
With so many out there that want disclosure and need disclosure, I mean, let's face it, disclosure and our community, the people that are with us, Dr. Greer, are here for emotional reasons, personal reasons. There are things that bring them here. And for them, for their own resolve in their minds, the only form of disclosure for them is a head of state like the president on live television, right? But it's probably never going to happen that way. We know this. So how do we start to affect the change? What's the best approach?
We do the disclosure. That's what the reason I did the disclosure project is that I had already met with White House folks and the CIA director and top people in the Senate Intelligence Committee personally, face to face, in extensive meetings. And it was made very clear to me that those people, almost to a fault, were not read into or had access to those projects when they inquired. As you know, Admiral Wilson had this happen, or denied access, or were threatened if they pushed too hard. And that if they did find out, like Ronald Reagan did, President Reagan, they're surrounded by a bubble of people who come in and tell them that this is a national security threat. So, for example, people went up on Capitol Hill after the initial release of that footage from the Pentagon in 2017, and there were closed door briefings that I have personal knowledge of members of that same team and cabal of disinformation specialists who were briefing members of the Senate and House intelligence and armed services, telling them the most terrifying things about UFOs. I know that happened for a personal fact. So what I'm saying is, this is why we have to be ever vigilant, but ultimately disclosure consists of we, the people, bypassing that circus and making contact. And I said this back in the early 90s, the ultimate, first of all, seeing is believing. So if you look at Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, there's just dozens and dozens and dozens of photos and videos of amazing CE5 contact events. Well, those, many of those, I wasn't even there. It was people who had practiced the protocols, understood how they worked, went out and gave it a whirl, and it happened. So I'm telling people that if you have millions and millions of people do that, who needs the CIA and the Pentagon or the president to disclose something? It's not like we don't have a brain or mind and the ETs aren't watching. Why do we need this intermediary of a bunch of sociopathic, craven, power-hungry politicians and government bureaucrats to validate something we all know is true already? Why don't we go and validate it ourselves? See, that's always been my argument, because the definition of a close encounter of the fifth kind is a human initiated and cooperative contact event, point to point, us to the visitors. And it isn't where we have to run it through the national security state. And in fact, that was the very first thing that the Army Intelligence Director and others threatened me with. They said, you have no clearance to be doing this. I said, I don't need your permission. You can go pound salt. I mean, you know how I am. I'm nice until I'm not nice. Right. And then it's hell on wheels. But what I'm saying is that I just said, I don't recognize your authority. I said that right to the face of the head of Army Intelligence and his CIA and NSA minions. And this was in 92. And after the thing happened in Florida, where we had these 4 craft appear, and it got in the newspaper, and the intelligence community went ballistic. They were very upset. So what I've said for almost 30 years to these folks is, you have your agenda. We need to have the people create their own agenda. What is the people's agenda? Do we all benefit from being scared out of our minds and going to interplanetary war? Or do we benefit from disclosure, direct contact, and coming together also? Let me just throw this in here. The third pillar, the part of this triangle, is the release of the technologies that would give us a new civilization with no poverty or pollution, the so-called 0-point anti-grav technologies. That is not going to happen in a world where you have $1,000 trillion in assets tied up in fossil fuels and the electric power grid as it is, et cetera, and so on. It's going to have to happen from the grassroots up. But guess what? Anyone listening, listen up. Listen very carefully. Oil went sub-zero, meaning that it was less than $0 per barrel on the futures.
Zero.
It's down so low that now, right now, listen to me, would be an awesome time for someone to get out of their own way who have these technologies and get them disclosed and bring them out. Why? Because the economy has already been falling into ashes.
That's a really good point.
The oil is already virtually worthless. It takes $60 a barrel to pull it out of the ground in Texas, and it's selling for $15. So this would be actually an excellent time to come out with a disclosure of that technology. I don't have it. The people who have develop them think that they're going to do it secretively and monetize it. What I'm recommending is we do an open source, massive disclosure of an operating new energy device that would run your house or business or a city without any fossil fuels, solar, wind, geothermal, whatever. These really advanced systems. The problem is that we either have to start a laboratory to do that from scratch, or we need someone who understands that you cannot do intellectual property and patent around something that is instantly going to be seized by jackbooted thugs. I'm using that word literally because I know people that have had that happen. I've had it happen with a member of my team who was developing one of these for us and had jackbooted thugs come in. So the only way we're going to be able to do it is someone has one operating, then I will happily take whatever risk personally to massively disclose it with the plans for it, open source, meaning there's no secrecy. Anyone who is skilled in the art of engineering can assemble it, build it, and let it run. But it needs to be vetted. It can't be snake oil. Almost everything out there on the internet in this space, when you drill down on it and get engineers to test it, they've either have mismeasured the power dynamics or it's an outright fraud, to be honest with you. But if someone's got a real one, let me just say this. If someone's got something legitimate, please contact me at SiriusDisclosure.com, SIRIUS Disclosure.com, and we will see that it is massively disclosed. And at this point, because for better or for worse, the profile we have, I can get that out in front of hundreds of millions of people, no question about it. And I don't need the mainstream media to do it. I will be on every influencer show from Joe Rogan to Logan Paul to Demi Lovato with one of these things operating. Where now, the intellectual property, listen, has already been shoved off into the pipeline. So nobody can confiscate it. It's out there dispersed to a million places. My friends, that is the only way you're going to get this environmental and macroeconomic and poverty issue solved. And right now, given the fact that the economy has fallen into ashes and fossil fuels are absolutely at rock bottom, would be an awesome time to do it.
Are you afraid? I mean, what are your thoughts of so many individuals, personalities in the alternative space over the last month have been deplatformed, removed, demonetized, censored across all platforms? Yeah, and it seems like any of us in this little slice of the world now is walking on eggshells. And they do it without, Dr. Greer, as you know, without any warning. Correct. There isn't any explanation. Right. It just happens. Right. And that's not what we have fought for on this planet, right? We fought for the opposite of that.
So much for freedom of speech.
Right. Are you worried? Are you worried about speaking out about things like this right now?
I'm not. There are certain things I am not saying. I had an event planned to live stream last week or week before, and I had to cancel it because it was made quite clear to me we would probably be banned. So I have to be careful because we don't have free speech anymore. We're in a terrible situation because the window, if you look at the documentary, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, there's a place in there where we mention, and then the attorney, Daniel Sheehan, states, we still have the internet and we still have some free speech, but that window is closing. This is what, it was very prescient because it's in the documentary. People need to see this documentary because it's in there. And by the way, if you get it on Vimeo or iTunes, you get 3 of these special features. That is that entire interview with Daniel Sheehan, my entire interview in the Batcave, and the compilation of all the CE5 photos and videos in one collection. But you have to get it at either Vimeo or iTunes to get those, just so people know. But I think that that's something that we have to be aware of, and we're sort of walking a tightrope And so you just have to do the best you can with the situation that you're in. I mean, we're a small, pretty much unfunded operation with no office and staff. I certainly don't own $1 trillion new media company like Alphabet or whoever out Google to control this. Neither do you. And therefore, we just have to do the best we can within the increasingly tight box that they're putting free speech in.
Well, I want to thank you for this conversation. We're going to move things forward now. Dr. Greer is going to, for the next 15 minutes, have a meditation with everybody here. I'm going to sign off, and in 15 minutes, I'll be back with Dr. Greer to wrap things up. But great conversation. Dr. Greer, take it away, and I'll see you in about 15 minutes.
Yeah, I will see you. I'm just going to do an introduction to consciousness and mind, and I'm going to lead a simple meditation technique that will involve the healing of the earth, a mass consciousness meditation for everyone.
This is going to be great. I'll see you in 15 minutes.
Time to do it. Thank you. Okay. Oh, look, that's nice. Look behind I don't know how you're looking, behind this shoulder. There's a beautiful symbol. It's the CSETI triangle. And Vicky, a member of our team in Colorado, made this rug. She made it by hand. And it's so cool. So we put it on an easel or a music stand so guys could see it. And I'd like to thank Vicky for making that for us. It's beautiful. So what I want to do now for this part of the show is to first introduce the concept of consciousness and mind, and just review for a moment the fact that if you look at the science of this, the mind whereby you're hearing my voice and I'm looking around the room and at this screen, the consciousness, not what you're conscious of, but the conscious stuff, the field of consciousness itself is unbounded.
So far, so good.
It's infinite.
Yeah.
And
yeah, so far, so good.
I hear you, Jimmy. Jimmy, you're not muted. And
yeah,
Jimmy, I hear you, Jimmy.
Well, you know what? It's all good. At least.
Hey, tell Michael. Why don't you tell Jimmy that his mic is a little hot? Jimmy, you don't realize that. Okay. I don't want to have both of us talking at the same time. So anyway, so that field of consciousness is a singularity. And this is, the beautiful quote from the physicist Schrodinger, who said, the total number of minds in the universe is one. It's a singularity. Now, we've been trained that our consciousness and mind is actually just in our skull and just in the room where we are. But the truth of it is that the science of consciousness has proven definitively that the mechanism whereby we are awake, that field consciousness, isn't limited by time or space, which means that when you quiet the mind and connect to that quiet space within, you can effect remote places. This is what remote viewing is. You can see a remote place, not only in space, but in time, in the future or in the past or right now. And it also means that in the conscious capacity that every awake being has, we have the ability to affect remote places. This is what the random number generators that Dr. John at Princeton was doing, where they would put their minds on a random number generator, and it would affect whether it was putting out zeros or ones by people just thinking to it. So this science of consciousness is really settled science. And Dr. Targ and I discussed that last week, where the science behind this is very, very clear, that our own awareness, and you don't have to be Ingo Swann or a sort of a renowned psychic to do this, but every single conscious awake being, their awareness is actually originating in this non-local unbounded, infinite field of consciousness that we can all connect to. Now, why is that important? It's because when we do this one person at a time, we can have these sort of amazing experiences. When we do it collectively, the effect it has on our environment is exponential. And they found this also with studies, that people who would be in a room and they would be meditating and putting their awareness, say, on a random number generator would have a certain effect. If there were two people who loved each other or were bonded together, the effect was not twice as much, but 10 times as much, exponential. So when you have a mass group, like right now, however many people will do this together, it has an effect in your environment and for the whole planet. And in fact, because it's not limited by space, in the entire cosmos. So you begin to realize that each one of us are a quantum hologram of consciousness. We're folded within us. The entirety of the cosmos and creation is present, even though our conscious minds are usually shut off to most of it. We're only open to our 5 senses. But in the meditative state, you can become aware of remote places in space or time and remote dimensions. Now, the reason this is also really important for making contact with extraterrestrial life forms is that because of the limits of the speed of light, which is what your cell phone or this transmission is doing, the speed of light, electromagnetic, is too slow. Like one of the ETs that visited us in Joshua Tree was from the Andromeda galaxy. Well, that's 2.5 million light years from here. That means at the speed of light, it would take 2.5 million years to say hello and the signal to get there, and another 2.5 million years for that planetary command center, let's call it, to answer back and say, how are you doing today? That just took 5 million Earth years to do that one exchange. That's why we know all of these interstellar civilizations are also transdimensional, using consciousness and thought, but also with very advanced technologies that interface with things that look like a cell phone, but they're actually interfacing with thought forms and with the quanta of thought. So I wanted to do that as sort of an introduction, sort of quickly, of what the potential is within our own conscious mind. That the conscious mind that we have is actually not limited to us. We are sort of the light within us. You can look at yourself as a window, an opening to the cosmos, and your individuality is illumined by the light of consciousness, but doesn't trap it. We trap it in our own belief system. But the truth of it is that your conscious mind is a singularity. It's one conscious field. And so when we come together in that joined space of pure consciousness, and then we meditate and we intend something wonderful to happen, like the healing of the planet, the guidance of our planet into the future, it actually alters the timeline of the future. It actually manifests that good future. And that's why in Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, we included the studies very briefly, where they showed that if 1% of the population of a community were meditating together, it caused crime rates to go down, emergency room visits to go down, greater coherence and peaceful behavior in the community. And the other 99% of the population had no idea those people were in the city. So that kind of knowledge is very empowering to us as individuals, because it takes a relatively small number of people to have when they're doing something very positive in consciousness and understanding what the conscious field is, to cause something wonderful to happen in our planet. And we need something wonderful to happen. We need this planet to get on its path of being transformed and put into an entirely new civilization. So that's what the purpose of this meditation is. So I'm going to do that for about 10 minutes. I'm going to lead a meditation, and I'd like for everyone right now to just make yourselves comfortable wherever you are. I'll try to, because I have to stay locked into where I'm in camera here. And we'll all close our eyes together. So let's close our eyes. And now I'd like for us to become very centered and quiet. And then begin to lightly focus on your breathing. And take some nice deep breaths in with your nose and out with your mouth. And then in with your nose and out with your mouth. And with each breath inward, in the center of your forehead and your third eye, become very quietly centered and see the light of consciousness. Just clear, conscious light. And with each exhalation, release all of your concerns and your limits, your fears and your doubts, and all your stress into the free air of Mother Earth, and relax. And so it is with each breath inward. We feel ourselves energized and expanded and awake. And with each exhalation, we release all of our concerns and all our tensions. And the breath of Mother Earth wafts them away and purifies them. And so let us do this in a cycle. With our inner breath, we become energized through the life force, the chi, the prana. And our minds are expanded and energized. And as we exhale, we see ourselves becoming calm and centered, and immersing ourselves into the light that is infinite, pure, cosmic mind. Now very gently, without straining, allow yourself, while being aware of your breath, to gently shift awareness to the mind watching the breath. And see that you are awake. And this awake mind is infinite. And you can see your own self. And how is that possible? Except that this infinite consciousness is our true self. And thus we may see our individuality. And so without straining, let us become very quiet in this pure conscious field. And let us see that it is an infinite ocean of quiet, pure mind, not limited by space or time, but boundless, eternal, infinite. Being thus aware of the conscious mind, let us begin to sense the space around us. And if you are with someone, sense that they are awake. and then realize that the awareness whereby they are awake and you are awake is one. There is no separation, because in consciousness, we are all one in spirit. There is one mind shining within all of us. And this is our true self. And so now, in this state, with freedom, like a bird let out of a cage, let us float upward into the space above our house or wherever we are located, and allow yourself to see the countryside or the city, wherever you are, and go upwards into the sky, free, and your vision gazing in all directions at will. And see it as it is right now. And now let us expand further and go high into the atmosphere. And we see the earth. And in the earth, we see there is 7 or 8 billion people living upon her. And as we expand, let us go upward and go out into the atmosphere and see the entire globe of the earth. Earth, our mother. And we see that she is also a conscious being, though not human. And this being, our Mother Earth, is awake. And she is female. And she is a conscious living being. And let us feel the unconditional love Earth has for her children. And let us return that to her in full measure, with a pure and open heart, with infinite love. And while we are in this state of expanded consciousness and love, let us become aware of Father Sky. And as we gaze around the cosmos, we see that the entirety of the universe is consciousness, manifesting as planets and stars and civilizations, too numerous to even count. And our minds expand and become one with that cosmic, unbounded being. And it is infinite and boundless. And that is the true nature of the conscious mind whereby each of us are awake at this very instant. And we are at one with that unbounded being. And now we gaze to the earth and we put our awareness with our heart made wide and open and our minds expanded and relaxed. And we ask that the great being and all of us together moving within the oneness of conscious spirit gaze upon the earth and humanity with the eye of kindness, and asks that the earth be healed and humanity be healed, and that we be guided to the path of safety and enlightenment. And as we do this, we see that there are beings from other planetary star systems. And we invite them into this meditation, and they are joining us as they merge their consciousness with ours. And we show them within our mind the beauty of Mother Earth. And we ask them to assist us as we gaze upon the earth and send a burst of light from the heart of the cosmos that suffuses the entire earth with consciousness and enlightenment and infinite love and peace. And as that impulse of light permeates and suffuses the earth, we see all ignorance vanishing and the times of the wars ending, and the great illnesses and pandemics that have swept the earth will be no more. And the wondrous sciences and technologies withheld from the people of the earth are disclosed and used only for peaceful and good purposes. And we see the earth in our mind transformed into the rose garden of peace, into a time of universal peace and cosmic awareness. And the earth and humanity begin to take their place amongst the other star people and the other planets as we join in with them and become a cosmic civilization. And the time of the great changes have arrived, and the transformation of the earth is at hand. And so in our hearts and our minds, we know and we see the truth. And we are not afraid, because we know across this chasm of chaos, there will be a civilization foretold by thousands of seers of the past, which will be a world of enlightenment, of universal peace, of great prosperity, and amazing and wondrous sciences. And so the earth will become the cradle of the evolution of enlightened conscious beings who will then go forward amongst the stars to teach those who are coming after us in a cycle that never ends, that is eternal, in the evolution of intelligent life in the cosmos. Namaste. Well, I think, Jimmy, you're back. He is.
That was calming. Thank you for that, Dr. Greer. And I often say that in this rushed life that we live on this planet, when we do a mass meditation like this, right, there's somebody on the other side of the world walking down the street, busy, doing their thing, and they get a little zzz, right?
They'll feel it.
Right? They do. Wow, I feel, what was that? Right?
That's how it happens. And people are really affected by that. And I'll tell you this little brief story before we end. When I was 18, and it was the fall that I had the contact with the ETs on the mountain up in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina. And there were these boys who were kind of drunks, well, rowdies, we call them. There's rowdy, and we're living in a dorm, but quite a few kids would get killed every year driving drunk between the little town of Boone, North Carolina, and Blowing Rock. There was a little 2-lane road back then and very treacherous. And I was meditating one afternoon in my little cubicle room. I had a roommate who was out at the time, and I saw that they were going to be killed. And so I said a prayer for their protection, but that also that they get out of this phase of just kind of wild, drunken rowdiness and self-destruction. And a few moments later, knock, knock, knock. I opened the door, and it's these guys who had been drunk, but they appeared stone sober, and they said, And they weren't talking to me. I think they were looking through me to some higher. And they said, please forgive us. And we're not going to do this anymore. I'm looking around and I'm just like a kid on the floor. I'm 18 years old.
Right.
They never did that again. Somehow that me connecting to that larger conscious self, asking for that in a pure-hearted way, affected them. But all three of them all together. It was a very, very strange early lesson for me in how powerful meditation and prayer can be.
I want to thank you for this conversation tonight and for hanging out with us for the last couple of weeks for these live streams.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been absolutely amazing. And as we wind down, I want to thank everybody that is with us right now. But you can continue this live stream over on the DisclosureFest, not only YouTube channel, but their Facebook page, and you can go to DisclosureFest.org, because coming up next, Paul Guy, and just like Dr. Greer, not only an influencer and somebody that is a bringer of knowledge for our community that we're so thankful for, Paul Guy is the caliber of musician like Dr. Greer is for bringing all of this information forward. Paul Guy is next. Dr. Greer, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate your time and your help and support. And I hope to see you soon again when we can get out of our homes.
We'll do it out here in LA as soon as we can get it set up. Thank you so much.
A good one. Bye-bye, everyone.
Dr. Stephen Greer. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Disclosure